Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to listen or watch this first episode of the King's Cross Talk podcast brought to you by King's Cross Church. Just a quick note before the first episode begins, we had a really good time recording with both Allison and Brittany. Allison just has an amazing story to tell, and we hope you enjoy listening to that. But just a quick note that during recording, Pastor Clint's microphone had some technical issues, and so his audio is going to sound just a little bit different than Allison and Brittany's. You'll still be able to hear everything he says, but his audio just won't be quite as clean and will have a little bit of an echo to it. We apologize for this, but we'll have that fixed for future episodes. Anyway, again, we had a great time with Brittany and Allison, and we hope you enjoy the first episode.
Welcome to King's Cross Talk, our first episode. I'm Clint Doris, lead pastor at King's Cross. And primarily what we want to do with these conversations is brag on the cross of Christ and how the gospel transforms lives. And primarily this is for King's Cross, our church, and just to encourage and edify our church and help our church get to know and hear stories of grace. But also if it would encourage and help other people, then we're happy for that to happen as well. So this first episode, excited to have Allison Beaty and Brittany West with us and talk about Allison's story particularly, and then her relationship with Brittany and the church and how, the Lord has used all of that. So thank you all for being with us. We'd love if you would just take a second, introduce yourself, and tell us a little bit about your families, and then even how long you've been a member at King's Cross.
Hi, I'm Allison Beaty, and I'm married to Eric, and I've been at King's Cross for, I guess, about 2.5 years now. And I'm originally from Texas, and I came up here to go to grad school at UNCG.
Cool. I'm Brittany West, and I am married to Craig West, and we have 3 boys, Spears, Wyatt, and Titus. And we've been at King's Cross since 2017, right after it planted, since Launch Sunday.
Absolutely. Great. And then Brittany's also married to Pastor Craig, who's a pastor here at King's Cross. So thank you all for being here. Allison, I'd love just to start. You've got a pretty unique testimony and story of God's grace. Now, every Christian story is a supernatural miracle. So in that way, we all have the same story, but the details are often encouraging for people to hear. So I'd love for you to just tell us a little bit about kind of growing up and how you came to faith in Christ.
Yeah, so I didn't grow up in a Christian home. And I remember from a very young age feeling very much like I needed to be perfect and feeling very anxious about that all the time. And we would occasionally go to church on holidays, like not even all the time on holidays, but occasionally. And I knew that there was a God, but I didn't know anything else about who God was. It was a very vague sense of there is something greater out there. But my parents primarily told me that the Bible was a collection of stories about how to be a good person. And that sort of the main goal in life is to be a good person and to make the right choices and do the right things. And so I thought that was my goal, and I was pretty good at it. I would follow the rules in school, and I was always, a joy to have in class and all of those things. But I was really fearful and anxious all the time. And I put all of my identity in that people pleasing and achievement in school, and also dance, which I had been doing from a young age. And in high school, I got injured several years in a row, and so I was out of dancing for a while. And that sort of sent me into a spiral of realizing I didn't know who I was outside of dance and outside of like being able to perform well. And so I started getting even more anxious, and I felt really empty, and I felt like I have no idea who I am. And around that time is when I became friends with a girl who, her and her family had been going to church, and I started going to church with them. It was not a Bible preaching church, really. It was not a great church. And I started going with them, and we actually we got into a romantic relationship through that. And it was sort of the first time I'd felt really loved and seen in a different way. And I thought, okay, this is what's been missing the whole time. I felt like unconditionally loved, and I felt like really seen, and I felt beautiful and all of these things. And no one had ever like looked at me that way. And so I thought that was the hole that I had been trying to fill. So I decided, okay, this new sexuality, this is going to be my identity. And so I was still going to this church, and I was actually got a Bible, and I started reading the Bible, but I was reading it in an effort to prove to some of my Christian friends that what I was doing was okay, and actually that it was like glorifying to God even. But I actually didn't know who God was at all, and I didn't care to know him, and I didn't think I needed to be saved. I thought I could do it on my own and control my life. So that lasted for a couple of years and into college. When that relationship ended, it was really manipulative. So there was a lot to recover from that, and it left me even more empty than before when that ended. And so then I was like, okay, well, I had wrapped up who I thought God was in all of that relationship and these other situations with friends that had stopped talking to me once they found out, and, you know, people that I thought, the only people that I knew that were Christians besides us, a couple like sort of had stopped being friends with me. But actually my best friend, Lane and Tanner, they live in Charlotte. They were some of the only friends that I knew totally disagreed with me, but still loved me and cared for me. And that was really transformational. But I wanted nothing to do with God because I thought I'd kind of connected him to all these sinful people's actions. And even like I never had actually even learned who he was. So I started doing the college thing and back to people pleasing, but also kind of partying and trying to just do whatever I wanted to try to make myself feel good. And it was getting worse. The hole was getting bigger. Nothing was working. And I decided to have lunch with this acquaintance who I knew was a Christian. We were in the same group of friends, but we never hung out one-on-one. And I had no idea why I was asking her to lunch. I was like, this is really weird, but I just kind of want to go to lunch with her. At lunch, we were at McAllister's. I remember the table. We were sitting there, and I was speaking. And as I was speaking, I was realizing some things for the first time. It was like not premeditated at all. I was like, I think that I need to learn who God is. I don't think I know who he is, and I think that I need him. And as I was saying it, I was like, why am I saying this? Like, what in the world? And she was like, you know, listening. And I said, but I don't even know where to start. It's so tangled in my past and in these relationships. I don't even know where to begin. And she was like, let's just wipe the slate clean and start over together. And so she was actually, I don't know why I didn't go to church with her, but I started going to a different church. Thankfully, by the grace of God, it was a really solid gospel preaching church. And she sort of, we got together and started reading the Bible together, and she kind of helped me start to learn how to read the Bible. And then around a couple of months later is actually when I met Eric, and he was going to a different church, but we started having conversations about the gospel and who God was. And I think at this time I'd sort of already kind of been like, okay, I need God, but I was just kind of learning the finer details. And then that next semester, the first semester of my senior year, there was a doctrine class at my church, and me and Eric took it together. And I think in that, God really used how he made my personality and my like love for learning, and I'm a big nerd, and I think he used that as well as I was reading Romans to really change my heart. And I think the biggest thing is, growing up, I never saw a need for grace because I thought I could do it all myself. And I didn't realize that even my good actions were sinful. And in this doctrine class, I sort of realized everything that I'd been trying to do apart from God was sin. And even my good behaviors and acts needed saving. And so it was actually like the wrath of God and the judgment of God that made me realize why grace was so beautiful. And it made it irresistible because I'd never known before. I'm like, what's this big grace deal? Who cares? Just be better, do better, you know, kind of thing. And then I realized how depraved I was and that there was nothing I could do. And that made grace really beautiful. I think that was kind of the tipping point. There wasn't an exact moment, but it was just sort of over time. Yeah. And then I got baptized that next spring, and I don't think I read the testimony I shared for my baptism a couple years ago. And it was like, I was like, wow, God's really grown me a lot because I didn't know a lot, but I did know that I needed saving. And so that was really special. And since then, God's just been really using really hard life circumstances to grow me. I'm really distrusting of God, and I still want to try to do it on my own. And I still struggle with anxiety, but he's putting me in situations where I have to trust him and I have no other choice. And I would never choose them on my own, but I can already see even just glimpses of why certain things have happened and how he's using those things to change my heart.
That's awesome. Do you remember the name of the church there that you got baptized?
Yeah, Redeemer Church in Lubbock, Texas. Yeah.
Praise God for them and for Eric and his role in that. Well, thanks for sharing. Again, such a beautiful story of God's grace and coming after you. Appreciate your transparency and honesty in that, and the clarity. Again, what we want to do in these conversations is brag on the cross and how God brings dead people to life through the gospel and by the power of His Spirit and using His people and different relationships and circumstances. So that's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that with us. So, Allison, you ended there in your own story talking about still the temptation to depend on yourself. And how God puts you in circumstances where you can't, where you got to lean on Him. And I know one of those circumstances that's massive is even the last few years and being at King's Cross. So I know you and your husband had planned to come up to Greensboro together for you to get your doctorate, right?
Master's.
Masters.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Get your master's in dance and kind of last minute. And maybe there's a whole other conversation at some point, even with Eric, to hear his story and God's work in his life. But last minute, your husband wasn't able to come. And so suddenly you find yourself in North Carolina going to get your master's at a new church and without your husband and trying to figure out how this is going to work. So I want to talk a little bit about that because I know that's one of those challenges. But the way I'd love to do that is to start with Brittany. Tell us a little bit about the first interactions you had with Allison and kind of hearing some of this story and maybe those first interactions, how you saw the Lord at work. But my goodness, here's going to be something that we're going to have to jump in and help. So I'd love to hear about when y'all met.
Yeah, so Allison came to our community group. So Yvonne, another member at King's Cross, invited Allison to our community group. And I remember it was maybe the first one of the fall, perhaps. But we were all sitting in a living room and we were sharing prayer requests. And Allison just started bawling and sharing her. And I didn't know Allison. I didn't know her story. I just heard her kind of pouring out her heart and also just being very confused. Like, what? I'm so confused as to why they can't be together here in North Carolina. And so, yeah, then she continued to come. Praise God. Because
they let me come back.
I thought maybe she won't come back to our community group because she's been so vulnerable and opened up with us and has... And so we didn't know her, but praise God, you kept coming back. And then in your membership interview at our house around our table with Pastor Craig, my husband, I got to hear your testimony and it was incredibly powerful to me. And I remember when Allison left, I just looked at Craig and said, wow, God is so good. And He is in the business of saving sinners. And what a cool story. Not easy, but really amazing that God's work in your life has been what it has been. And yeah, we knew that our work was for the next 3 years, what it was going to look like, that we were going to dig in. So
tell us a little bit about, again, what was going on in you in that moment and those circumstances.
So it actually started a little bit before we moved up here. Without going into detail, my husband got into some trouble with the law when he was younger. And so there's been a lot of consequences from that. And something happened about 9 months into our marriage that sort of shook my world upside down. And I remember when that first happened, I was, making lists and trying to figure out what can I do to make this go away. And I don't even know that I prayed about it for the first week or so. I was just trying to figure out how to get it to go away. And then it ended up being a 1.5 year long wait for that particular situation to be resolved. And thankfully, by God's grace, it was a miracle and it was totally solved, but it was really intense. So that sort of set me up for starting to have to trust God. And then we moved here, and Eric actually did move here, and he had to move a month later. He had to go back to Texas. And that was really difficult. And I told Eric, I said, we kind of had a choice. They weren't great choices. Both were horrible. And I said, I trust you. Whatever you do, we'll do. Whatever you decide, we'll do. So he went back, and I think that same week he went back is when Yvonne invited me to community group, and I thought, I can't do this by myself. I don't know anyone here. I have to be in community. This is not going to work. If I try to do this by myself, it's going to end really badly. So I went to community group, and I was walking in, and I thought, don't get weird. Don't tell them everything. Like, they don't need to know everything. Like, they don't know you yet. Like, you don't know them. Like, don't get weird. And then the prayer requests started happening, and I was like, well, I can't lie. Like, what am I going to ask for prayers for, like, if not this? So then I started crying, and it's a running joke now. But actually, King's Cross was the first church that we visited. So we moved up here with my in-laws. They helped us move. We came on a Saturday. Sunday was when we came to King's Cross. I just had Googled it, and I was like, okay, we'll try this one first. And as we were leaving, my mother-in-law was like, I think this is going to be your new church family. And I was like, that's the first one we went to. Like, yeah, it was great, but we can't just go to the first one. So we tried a couple other churches, and we kept comparing them to King's Cross. I was like, okay, maybe we should go back. And also a really big influence for that too was I don't think we left until 45 minutes after the service was over, because so many people came up to us to introduce themselves. And when at that time we were thinking Eric would need a job, and so many people offered to get him a job, and he actually did get a job offer from one of them before he left. But I just remember thinking, wow, they don't even know us yet, and they're already so willing to help. That kind of was really new to me, and I had never experienced that in church. So we ended up coming back to King's Cross and saying, okay, yeah, the first place we went was the best. We got to go back.
And we're glad you did.
Yeah.
So I'd love now just to hear, Britt, maybe when you started initiating regularly, I know the West family, their front door is kind of a revolving door. People are always in your home. But just as you and Craig begin to think and talk and figure out how to minister to Allison, so I know there's now kind of these discipleship relationships that have formed that have been really, really sweet to you and to you as well. And Yvonne, some other girls that have been kind of in and involved with these. So just talk a little bit about how that happened and how organic was it versus how formalized was it? But how did you become a fixture at the West House on, is it Wednesday nights?
Wednesday nights.
There you go. So yeah, talk a little bit about for you and Craig, just a heart for that, and then what you've seen God do in it.
We love to invite people over for dinner, and just like the intro to your sermon, I mean, so much happens around the table. And so we began having you over for dinner, right? I mean, details are really hard for me as far as going back, but I don't remember when we began kind of having it every week, but
I think it was there was a community group Sunday. It was not long into after I had balled that community group, where you were like, I don't know your situation, but Craig was gone for quite a decent portion of our marriage when I had kids, and I kind of understand that. And I remember when that was really, really meaningful to me. That was a big moment, because I don't think we'd really talked too much since then. And you came up to me and were like, I kind of understand, if you need me, I'm here. And I think that's I think you invited me over, and yeah.
So around the table, it just became, Allison's coming over for dinner. And I think we had started every other Wednesday. Mm-hmm. And maybe Yvonne was in the other week on Wednesday. Mm-hmm. And then we sort of rolled it all into one and just made it an every Wednesday thing. It was a fixture. Yvonne and Allison have hugged my boys goodnight, and they've done family worship with us, eaten dinner, drank coffee until late to the night, too late into the night, and
way too late.
It's been so life-giving, but just to be able to challenge each other and talk about what we're learning, things that we're struggling with. And
so I'd love for you to just talk about how the Lord has used that, particularly in the difficulty during this season, being away from your husband, and even some of his visits up. And I'd love for you to just talk about how the Lord has used those relationships to encourage and sustain you in the midst of this season.
Yeah, well, it's done that, encourage and sustain me. I feel like I would have strayed if I was on my own, and I don't trust myself, and it's been a lot of really hard months being away, and I don't think I'd be fighting my sin like I am, and I don't think I would be I don't think I'd be growing like I am. I think that this season could have been a time to distrust God even more and think that he's not good, but I've never been more sure that God is good. And in this season, never been more sure. And I think a big part of that is that he's brought people into my life to remind me that he hasn't abandoned me. Yes, Eric's not here, but I'm not alone, and God's here with me, but also to be even more tangible, he's given me people in the flesh to be you're not alone and we're here. There's been several times I've called Brittany and been like, I am not doing well. I can't be by myself. And she's like, come on over. We'll get our nails done. We'll fold laundry with me or whatever. And in those moments, having someone to turn to so that I don't go down a pattern of sin has been instrumental. I just don't even know where I would be without it.
praise God. That's super encouraging to hear. Also, I would love maybe you tell us just a little bit about like how has being a part and have these relationships and being involved with the church, how's that helped minister to Eric while you're away? Because I can't imagine some of the, and even having met him and spent some time with you guys at the West House, just how's that encouraged and helped him?
Yeah. Well, we've talked about this a couple of times, how it's kind of crazy how we have two church families like praying for us and caring for us and feel like extra loved. Even though we would rather be in the same church family, it's like we have two groups of people on our side and rooting for us. And I think it's been an encouragement to him. One, I think he's like seeing the fruit of the growth in this period, but also just like, I think it's probably helped him not feel so guilty for not being here and knowing that I'm not by myself and that I have people that can care for me, or if I'm my car breaks down or something, or I have a crazy neighbor that Craig can come over and make sure that I'm safe. I'm sure like practically that's really been helpful, but I think even just two, this is only the second church family I've been a part of, and I think like I've fallen in love with the church, here, and I think that's been really big because he had that growing up, and he knows the importance of church and community. And not that I didn't know, but it's like I know now.
Well, Allison, I know now we're so thankful for kind of what's happened. I think just for me particularly, it was a Sunday, it was several months back, that after the service you had some tears in your eyes. And as a pastor there, you wonder, man, we're trying to preach the word, we're trying to shepherd, and we hope it's helping people. And so there are these little interactions you get to have that are super encouraging. And you pulled me aside with tears in your eyes, and you were just talking about the nature of the faith family and blood family, and just how grateful you were for King's Cross. And that meant a ton to me. And so in these moments then where it's like, now it's this is your last Sunday with us, as a member here, that begins to feel emotional, because it's like, man, there's a family member leaving, but we're so grateful for the season. And I think for us, what you're modeling so well is you're going to High Point Baptist Church in Texas, where Pastor Juan Sanchez is a friend of mine. And so I just found that out a few weeks ago. I was like, oh my goodness, like if there were 10 churches in the whole country that I could pick, this would be on the list, and you happen to be going there. And so I think it's just your story is also a beautiful picture of how local church is the one that led you to faith and baptized you, King's Cross during this season, and then Eric's already plugged in, and I believe doing a Bible study or something with Pastor Juan, and I was able to email him and have interaction to say how excited we were for you guys to be there. So I'd love for, just as you're leaving, any thoughts about just now you mentioned it, but just your love for the church broadly, how God has increased your love for the church, and how that changes even going back to Texas, and how you're different in that. So just any kind of last summary highlights, that even particularly to encourage the saints at King's Cross that you would have. And then Britt, anything you want to throw on top of that, and we'll conclude the conversation.
Yeah, whenever we moved up here, I wanted us to find a smaller church, because we were the church in Lubbock was a great church, but it was pretty big. And it's such a college town too. It was like very, not as diverse in age and lifestyle or life stage and all of that. But I wanted to find a smaller church because I was nervous about finding community, because I didn't know anybody here. I didn't have any family here, anything like that. And I thought, okay, it'll be easier at a smaller church. So that was kind of like an initial thing, but that doesn't necessarily mean, a small church doesn't mean that they're going to love you well. But I think King's Cross does that so well. Like even that first Sunday, we didn't leave for so long because so many people realized we were new and they didn't know us, and they like offered to help in so many ways. And I think that's been like the biggest encouragement, is knowing that like even if it's something that's like not necessarily going wrong, but it's like slightly uncomfortable, there's like people to help, and are just so willing to drop everything to help. And it's also like encouraged me to be a better friend in that way too, and be willing to sacrifice my time or like my relaxation time or free time, what little of it I have, to spend with other people, whether it be over dinner and encouraging them that way, or helping them move, or picking their kids up from school, or whatever it might be. And I didn't get to do a lot of that here because my schedule was so crazy, but I received a lot of that. And it was really encouraging. And I don't know, I think this is the first season of my life that I like understand what it means for like a church to be a family. And like we're so different. Like Brittany does CrossFit and I do not. But like one of the closest relationships I have, and like seeing the diversity at King's Cross and how different we are, but like some of these relationships are the richest I've ever experienced. And I think before, most of my Christian community was more like me. And not that that's bad, that's wonderful too. But just seeing the unity and despite differences, and seeing it just feels, I don't know how to explain it, it just feels like a family. Yeah.
That's awesome. Britt, yeah, what are some of your the sweetest kind of memories and observations of this season, and just highlights of this, with no tears allowed? I'm kidding. If tears come, then praise God.
I'll save those for Sunday. I think for our family, well, first of all, I've learned a lot about dance. That was very new to me, the whole dance world. But so that's been fun. But also really just being able to see God work. I've been able to celebrate with you in really cool seasons, and even recently how the Lord has provided, and that has cheered my heart. Even it's built my faith, just in what God can do. Maybe I will cry. I don't know. But really, just around the table, how my boys will always ask, "Is Miss Allison and our Miss Yvonne, are they coming over tonight for dinner?" It has become such a staple, and even just being able to display that for my children and our boys. And really, we do have an open door policy, and hey, come over and hang out anytime. And that isn't always easy, but just how the Lord shows up in those times. And even just sitting watching basketball, which I also don't like, but sitting and watching basketball and hanging out. For some reason during the COVID, there was a lot of basketball going on, right? There was a lot of basketball. Yeah. But then also when you were gone for the period of time for COVID and you had gone back to Texas, how you would Zoom in for our community groups, and how fun that was just to be able to have Eric there too. Holidays that we've shared together on times that you were here and you were away from your family, and Eric, but also Eric got to come over sometimes too. It's just been a really sweet season. I think this friendship has grown my faith as well. So.
I was going to say one more thing. Go for it. Also, like being with the West, like letting us in to like every part of their life. Like, I feel like it's taught me a lot about Christian family, and like I didn't grow up in a Christian home, and seeing like practically how they work the gospel out in their home, and how they like, discipline their children or do family worship, like encourages me, because I haven't ever seen that picture. And just like letting us into all of the ugly and the beautiful and the mess, it's never that messy, has been really encouraging to me. And I feel like it's like helping prepare me for that like future too. And also it's helping me see that like Christian service and caring for your brothers and sisters is really that easy. It's just opening your door. And like, I'm excited to go back to our house that has room to have people over and just open the door, like regardless of like, hey, I'm folding laundry, come on in kind of thing. It's been really encouraging, and I'm excited to like model that after what I've seen them do. And I feel fortunate to have seen, them do that so well, and now I feel equipped to do it as well.
Well, thank you all for the conversation. This has been even better than I hoped it would be. And just as we wrap it up again, in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, the Apostle Paul said, "I decided to know nothing among you except Christ and Him crucified." And then down in verse 5, he says, "That your faith might not rest in the wisdom of men, but the power of God." And so with King's Cross Talk, our hope is just to brag on the cross and show off the power of God and how it changes conversion, and leads to conversion and then discipleship relationships, and creates a family in the church out of people that otherwise might not spend time together. So I hope this has encouraged you. And King's Cross, may we continue to demonstrate and model what it looks like to be hospitable, to reach out to people the first Sunday they visit, and invite them into our lives. Love you guys. Grace and peace.